Just gather around where you can. Okay, so the next steps to the process, number one is that, like we said, the paper has to be wet. These are our soaking bins that we'll use to wet the paper. The paper that we use is not incredibly thick, so it doesn't have to soak for a very, very long time. You want to have it in there, I would say, at least a minute or two, no longer than 10 minutes. The way the paper is, if it's in there for that long, it would probably start to disintegrate. So we don't want to leave it in there a really long time. You don't want to come in at the beginning of a period if you're not ready to print and put it in there and leave it. So I've let it soak. These are the towels that we'll use to dry it. So you want to make sure that the towel's kind of flat. Make sure your hands are clean. Like, I like to keep a damp paper towel so that if I get any ink on my hands while I'm working, I can make sure they're clean, because we don't want any fingerprints on our paper. That's a big part of the craftsmanship. So just kind of make sure that your hands are clean as you go. In this process, it's a little easier to keep your hands clean, but the other printmaking processes that we'll start working with, it's a huge mess. So we lay it flat, make sure there's no wrinkles on the paper. Be careful not to like pull it around a whole lot while it's wet, because it does make the paper fragile, obviously, and it's way easier to tear. Then I'm gonna lay this down flat and just apply pressure kind of evenly over the paper to get the water off of it and have it still be wet. It's really important, like if you did have ink on your hands before you grabbed your paper, don't like wipe it on this towel, because this is where we're putting clean paper. So we want the paper to stay clean, and if you're wiping your hands on these towels, they're not clean. I know they don't look clean, but they're just stained. All right, so now that our paper has been, the paper shouldn't look shiny. If it still looks shiny, then it's still too wet. But if it's like this, it's wet paper obviously, but it's matte, then that's okay. So I'm gonna leave that there for just a minute. The way that this process works, we want to put plate down first and paper on top. Make sure that your plate is face up, because it is transparent. That obviously makes it difficult to see if it's face up, but I know because I wrote my word backwards that this is face up. I'm going to place it, this is called the press bed. You want to place it kind of in the center of the press bed, closer to the barrel. This is the barrel that it rolls through. The barrel can be tightened, so it's lowered to go on a plate a little bit tighter, or it can be loosened if you're putting through a thicker plate. Then you want it to be looser so that it's not applying too much pressure. If there's too much pressure, the plate can break. If it's going through there, it can get cracked. All right, so now we're gonna take our paper and very carefully, because it is wet and can tear, we're gonna lay it on top of our plate. And you'll notice that the paper is bigger than the plate and it's longer. You want to place it so that these three sides, whatever the top and right and left are equal, and that there's more paper left at the bottom. Because in printmaking, that's how we designate the bottom of an image. So if mine were horizontal, then my paper would be shaped a little bit differently, and I want to make sure that the heavier weight of the empty paper at the bottom is on the bottom of the horizontal side. So once the paper has touched the plate, you really don't want to move it anymore, because it's already wet and it's started to absorb it. All right, now before we roll it through here, you can see that these blankets, that's what these are called, these are blankets, they're filthy, they're disgusting, people abuse them. What you're supposed to do is take a piece of newsprint and put it over your plate like this, so that it protects the blankets from any ink on your plate, then it's also vice versa protecting your plate and your paper from anything that's on these blankets at this point. That's not how it's supposed to work, but here we are. So we lay the blankets down, and we want to use this to roll it through. This rotates the barrel and it pushes the plate through. I haven't used this year yet, so we might have to adjust the pressure. When you roll it, yeah, it's gonna have to be more. We have to feel a significant change in pressure when it touches the plate. If not, it's not putting it down hard enough. Hopefully I'll get this set and it doesn't have to be tinkered with, because it's kind of temperamental. Let's see if that's good. Oh, that's much better. Oh yeah. So I could feel a change when it touched the plate. It became a little bit harder for me to turn. If it doesn't seem harder to turn, then there's not enough pressure. More face down, just the best way to drop your glasses. All right, so we go through, we pretend like we're the captain of a ship and we're steering the ship. Contemplate the sea. And as you get all the way off the plate, you can feel it, like whenever you're turning it, you can feel the pressure is a little bit less. Then you want to go back the opposite direction one more time. And you don't want to let these blankets slip, like you don't want to push them all the way under the barrel or else they come out, so you want to leave some here. Come up. Awful job at placement. I'll show you guys a better trick for that. And when we peel it up, everything that we did transferred over. So, why was this bad? What? Because remember, do you remember what that looked like originally?
It's smushed like expanded.
Yep. Because of the pressure that you're applying with the press, when there's a big clump of paint, it's going to smush it and it's going to change the shape of whatever you did. So do not put big clumps because they're just going to mush all the way through because of the pressure of the press. The other thing here, and I mean, if you like the look of this here, like so that it's kind of watery, that's one thing, but just know that that will happen. You know, that it will look exactly how it looks on the plate on the paper. So ideally, this looks awful, the placement of the plate. What I was talking about was that like up here, this should be even, this should be even, and this should be even, and then it's bigger at the bottom, which is kind of right, except it's incredibly crooked. This is where you would title, number, and sign it after your paper is dry. You put the title, the number, so if we were doing an addition of 3, this would be 1 of 3, like a fraction, 1-3. And then you sign it, you know, wherever your signature looks like, I don't care what that looks like. Because these are monoprints, it is technically an addition of 1. It's not a 1 of 3, even though we're technically doing 3 prints, it's not from the same image. So what you put for that is AP, which means artist's print. And that just means that it's a special edition of only 1. So it would be title, mine would be example, AP, you know, and sign my name here. I'm gonna have ceiling tiles actually that I'm gonna place somewhere in the classroom that's convenient. And to let these dry, you wanna place them between the ceiling tiles so that they dry flat. Because if we just let it dry like this, obviously wet paper dries wrinkled. And if we put them under the ceiling tiles, the material that they're made out of, lets it breathe a little bit, but it keeps it super flat because they're kind of, I don't know what they're made out of, but they're not solid. All right. So now that you understand the process, the next step that I want you to be thinking of is a theme. Remember that I told you guys a lot of this class is going to be your choice of the content of your projects. Not everything, but a lot. And this is one of those projects. So the theme that you come up with for your 2 prints that go, the 2 prints that go together, I want you to come up with whatever theme you want to work with. Maybe you're referencing that 50-word list that we came up with on the first couple of days of school. You don't have to, but it's just an option of somewhere you could start if you need to. And you're coming up with 2 different prints that fit the same theme for your project. The good thing about the plates that I'm going to give you, and I'm going to go ahead and give them to you so you'll know the size of them and you can plan your composition accordingly to the correct size of the plate. But because these plates are clear, they're transparent, you can actually draw and design exactly what you want it to look like and then lay it on top of it and then trace it on your plate. So the sketch that we do for this project is basically an exact template for the actual plate, and it can be used that way. So I would recommend really putting the effort into the plate so that when you get ready to put it into the sketch, so that when you get ready to put it onto the plate, you can just lay it there and you've got a plan for exactly what you're supposed to do. You're basically just tracing your own work, but on the plate. What questions do you guys have?
How do we make sure that the placement is okay so that...
Okay, so what we'll do, and this is just that's a really good question. So you would take a piece of newsprint, not this piece because it's wet, but just for example, take a piece of newsprint. You would trace the size and shape of the paper on the newsprint, remove it, then trace your plate in the right spot so that now you would put the newsprint down on the press bed first, put your plate in the correct spot where you've traced it, and then lay your paper over that in the correct spot. Does that make sense? Would it help if I did it and actually showed you guys? Or do y'all kind of think you get it? You want me to do it? Mm-hmm. It's not hard, I'll do it. Just give me a second to set that up and I'll show you guys. Good? What other questions do you have? Okay, so today is just planning. Like I said, I'll pass out the plates so that you know what size they are and you can trace them onto a piece of paper so you can actually come up with the full composition. Remember that we want to be using our space really well. We're not just focusing on the mono printing technique, we're still incorporating those elements and principles of art so that we've got a good, successful composition. All right, so I'll get the template set up so I can show you guys that part of it, and then besides that, while I'm doing that, I need you guys to work. Get your ideas going, start brainstorming, do some research,